Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're traveling back more than a century in time, to a city heavy with humidity, dim gas lamps, and the lingering pulse of jazz behind warped wooden walls. But somewhere in all of that, there is a figure no one sees, footsteps no one hears, and an axe raised in silence. You're lying in bed, maybe in a small room with a window left slightly ajar. The night breeze drifts in, carrying the earthy scent of damp brick and moss creeping through cracked mortar. In the distance, a steamboat whistles on the Mississippi, but you can't help but wonder, were those other footsteps you heard just now? So, before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I'd love to know how we're connecting tonight across the shadows. Now, turn off the lights, maybe switch on a fan for that soft humming in the background, and let's begin tonight's journey. You step into New Orleans, May of 1918. This city isn't like any other in America. It breathes with its own rhythm, restless, seductive, and sometimes unsettling enough to make you lock your doors before sundown. The Maggio family was first, an Italian couple living on Upperline Street. One early morning, their bodies were discovered in bed, brutally attacked with an axe, their throats slashed deeply. Strangely, nothing was stolen. Money remained untouched. Belongings were still in place. And the murder weapon? A household axe, their own. You wonder, how could no one have heard anything? But imagine this: homes close together, humid summer nights with every window open for a breath of air. Cicadas, train whistles, drunk voices from bars. One scream, one thud, easily drowned in the nightly noise. That wasn't the only attack. Over the following months, more families were targeted. All had one thing in common: struck in their sleep, entry forced through the back of the house, a board pried loose, and the same type of weapon, an axe, already inside the home. Someone was quietly walking the neighborhoods by night, choosing victims seemingly at random. But there's one detail you can't ignore. Nearly all the victims were Italian-American, often grocers or laborers. You're starting to feel a chill, aren't you? Don't worry, I'll keep it gentle. After all, this is a bedtime story. Panic crept into the city. People installed iron bars, bought guard dogs, formed neighborhood patrols. Police were overwhelmed. There were no clear leads, no motive, and the killer seemed to vanish into thin air after each attack. One night, imagine you're just an ordinary resident, sitting by your window, sipping a glass of cane juice, staring at the empty street. A man walks by, wide-brimmed hat. You blink, and he's gone. Rumors swirl. A serial killer? A vengeful spirit? Or someone targeting Italians out of hatred? Here's a strange detail not often mentioned. In one case, a victim, Harriet Lowe, survived long enough to say her attacker was an older white man who spoke fluent French. But she died before she could elaborate. Police didn't take her seriously. Perhaps she was delirious. Or perhaps what she said was too frightening to believe. But investigators still can't agree on whether these were the work of one coordinated killer or a string of copycats fanning the city's growing hysteria. One night, just before bed, you hear a gentle tapping on your window. Not loud, not urgent, just 1, 2, 3 knocks. You freeze. Then a faint rustle, like someone walking on gravel. But when you pull back the curtain, there's only the silhouette of a tree swaying in moonlight. Those July nights in New Orleans were sweltering. No one dared fall too deeply asleep. That axe hanging in the shed out back, it used to mean work. Now it meant fear. But throwing it out, what if that made him angry? An elderly woman once said she kept jazz playing all night because something whispered in my ear during a nap. Music calms him. Who knows? Let's pause here. How are you feeling so far? The story has only just begun. There's still time to rest your hand on your chest and feel how fast your heart is beating.
You're still awake, aren't you? The night hasn't passed, and the axe hasn't stopped falling. You're sitting in that same room where the breath of New Orleans seems to drift through every crack in the walls. Something lingers just beyond the flickering oil lamp, as if he never truly left. One morning in March 1919, the Times-Picayune published a strange letter. No named recipient, no sealed envelope, just a handwritten message. But the contents were chilling. I am the spirit from the hottest hell. I am what you New Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. You read it again, and you're not sure if it's the rambling of a madman or a twisted game crafted by someone who knew how to manipulate fear. But the message only got stranger. Axeman, that's how he named himself, declared that he would roam the city on the night of Tuesday, March 19th. Any household not playing jazz music that night would suffer a visit from him. You picture it. Thousands of families scrambling to play something, anything. Record players humming, live musicians invited into parlors, jazz drifting from every window, not out of joy, but out of desperation. For one night, New Orleans became a symphony of survival, and no one died that night. No axe, no blood, no shadows slipping through back doors. You wonder, was it a coincidence or a calculated move, a performance of power, a maestro conducting terror with music instead of strings? One music collector later recalled that record sales spiked after that night. A song called "Don't Scare Me, Mr. Axeman" was released, with the jazzy beat and a nervous laugh between the lines. People started speaking about him not as a killer, but as a myth, a legend, part of New Orleans' twisted charm. But don't let the rhythm fool you. Just 2 months later, a couple was attacked in their sleep. Still an axe, still a pried board at the back of the house, still nothing stolen. And here's where it gets even stranger. This time, the victims weren't Italian, they were German. The pattern was broken, and suddenly, no one knew what to expect. Old or young, man or woman, immigrant or not, if you were asleep, you could be next. You're starting to feel short of breath, not from fear, but from the sensation of being watched, as if the Axeman never stopped walking the streets in 1919, but instead slipped into the story you're listening to right now, in this very year, wherever you are sitting. You come across an old article and see a name, Joseph Mumfree. Who was he? A man with a criminal record long suspected to be the Axeman, but no solid proof ever surfaced, and when authorities came looking, Mumfree vanished, just like the man with the axe. There's another story. A woman named Esther Albano claimed she shot a man she believed was the Axeman. She was arrested, but the case was quickly buried. Did she kill the right person, or was it just a desperate act to end the nightmare? But investigators still can't agree whether the Axeman was a single disturbed mind or multiple people mimicking the terror for their own twisted purposes. You might even wonder, what if the infamous letter to the newspaper wasn't written by the killer at all? What if it came from someone outside the crimes? A reporter, a jazz enthusiast with an eccentric sense of humor, a hoax so good it became real. All of it is possible, and none of it is proven. Here's a little-known fact. In some crime scenes, investigators found muddy footprints on the floor, suggesting that the killer might have stood silently in the dark for a long time before striking. That sends a deeper chill down your spine. He didn't just break in. He waited. For hours, maybe. Until you were drifting off, one hand slipping free from the blanket, a thud on the floor, as soft as a breath. And then he walked away, calmly, no panic. You picture him walking beneath flickering gaslight, down waterlogged streets, axe over his shoulder, ears tuned to the sound of jazz drifting through windows, a melody that today you could stream on Spotify, but back then, it was a prayer for mercy. One local carpenter once said after inspecting the broken panels on houses, only someone familiar with New Orleans homes would know which planks to target. So maybe the killer wasn't a stranger. Maybe he was one of them. You return to the question, who was he, and why did he stop? The answer may live inside you, in your imagination, where the axe still lingers in the night, ready to fall again, if you forget the music. But don't be afraid. We still have one more part to go, and you're still awake, aren't you?
New Orleans, autumn of 1919. The city no longer echoes with jazz blaring from every house, but people haven't stopped whispering his name. The Axeman. The murders began to fade. No more screams in the night. No more headlines soaked in fear. Police still patrolled. The press kept spinning theories. But then, nothing. It was as if he simply decided the game was over. You sit there, imagining yourself as a citizen back then. Maybe you checked the paper each morning, scanning for news of another death. Maybe you quietly tucked away the axe behind your house, wrapped in cloth, hidden from view. And then, life went on. But not everyone forgot. Some began to research. Some rewrote the cases, compared every odd detail, studied yellowed crime scene photos with eyes desperate for closure. And decades later, people began to wonder, was the Axeman even real? Or was he a symbol of panic, of confusion, of stories stretched too far by frightened imaginations and hungry newspapers? What do you think? How does a killer disappear completely? No trace, no confession, no body, no ending. Or maybe that's exactly why he remains so terrifying. Here's a little-known detail. In one suspected Axeman case, a silver necklace with the letter A was found under a victim's pillow. But no one could confirm whose it was. There were no records. No one came forward. The evidence faded into legend. You begin to feel everything around you blurring, not out of fear, but because you're drifting deeper into a fog of memory and myth. Old brick walls, narrow alleys lit by flickering lamps, and a tall shadow walking by. It all starts to feel like a dream or a collective nightmare. Modern investigators have tried matching DNA from the scenes, but the evidence is too old. Objects are gone. witnesses long dead. The answers, if they ever existed, were buried in silence and dust. You might wonder, if the Axeman were alive today, what would he think, knowing he'd become a character in films, novels, podcasts, and in the story you're hearing tonight? But investigators still can't agree on whether he was a twisted genius, a random madman, or simply the dark reflection of a terrified city's imagination. We fear what we can't understand. And maybe that's what gives the Axeman power even now. He could have been anyone. A baker, a saxophonist, a neighbor planting cucumbers in his backyard. You want the truth. But some truths don't come with clean endings. Some doors, when opened, show only wind and shadows. And still, you want to knock, don't you? Now, everything is still. No footsteps, no axe falling. Just you and the steady rhythm of your own breath. Tonight, you've walked through a story without resolution. A journey from yellowed gaslight and soft record scratches to a killer's eerie letter and a city's collective whisper. You've listened to the weight of an axe that no longer falls, but still waits just beyond the edge of sleep. It all passes eventually, like a sad jazz tune played at midnight, fading before sunrise. But sometimes, just when you think it's over, you hear a knock. Just the wind, or something standing on your balcony. Don't worry, he's not here anymore. Maybe he never left. Maybe he's just waiting for someone to forget the music. Sleep well, and if you're brave enough, play a little jazz before you turn out the lights. And if tonight you dream of a man in a wide-brimmed hat holding an axe, standing in the corner of your room, just remember, it's only a dream with no ending.